Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight Brian Hancock. No, it's Brandon. Brandon Hancock. So let's go, Brandon. All right. And you're an electrical engineer and an AI expert. Is that correct?
That's, you got it in a
Great,
nutshell.
great. And so we can take our conversations many ways. Well, start with your name, Brandon. Do people kid you much about that? Let's go, Brandon. Have your friends wondered about that?
The second that all came out, I got shirts, koozies, hats, the full
Let's go,
9
Brandon.
yards.
Oh, great.
So,
Well,
they went to the nines.
That was an unexpected advantage of your name. That's good. Well, okay, we can start out. I'll ask a question. What exactly is AI?
So, in a nutshell, it is artificial intelligence, but basically what people mostly are referring to nowadays. Have you got to experiment with ChatGPT or any of these tools?
I have not, but why don't you discuss that a little bit? What is AI? And I think there's generative AI, and there are all kinds of different
I'll
nuances of that. Why don't you just lead our large audience through this discussion?
All right, so I'll kind of break it down. So, like I said, AI, artificial intelligence. There are a bunch of we've made a ton of progress over the past really decade or two. It used to be something called machine learning, which was
Yes.
really good at starting to do more classification of so for text, is this happy text or sad text?
Yes.
Then we started to get to more pictures, dog, not dog.
Right.
And things have just continually progressed. And then it got really in the weeds with these things called neural networks. Not going to go into all of that. But eventually where we're at right now, the big thing on the scene is called large language models. And that's usually, ChatGPT is the biggest one. Probably a lot of people have got to play with it. But the best way I could describe it is an AI that is trained and informed at using natural language, and it can basically talk like a human. And so that's it in a nutshell.
Right. Okay. And the joke is maybe it's not a joke. They're a possible replacement for our poor biological creatures. We might have a sort of, from a scientific point of view or science fiction point of view, a replacement a little bit. But let's explore the way that AI is trained. Now, there can be a inexpensive training or an expensive training, and exactly what is that? Can we discuss that? How do you train? Okay, I want to get a Joe Sam Robinson, I guess, fellow spirit here, if that's possible. So presumably we'd get everything that I said. We'd have it all there, and then the machine would start to go through and by trial and error recreate the way that I use words.
Yes.
Is that right? And then but how does that work? I mean, how many words would they need? Is there a number? And is there a cybernetic loop to do better and better with imitating me?
So you asked an awesome question. So I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds just because I want people to hear some of these terms. Because like I said, I'm on the more developer side. So
Right.
it's cool because I get a peek behind the curtain
Right,
before
yes,
these tools
yes,
kind of
right,
come out
right.
to the public. So yeah, the how to turn you into a cyborg, basically,
Yes.
the way to go to do that.
Right.
You would take one of these pre-trained models. So I'll just go ahead and say a few. There's Llama 3, Mistral, or ChatGPT 4. These are all just models, large language models that are really good at conversating with
Now,
one
who
another.
owns those models? Is it? In other words, does a company own them, and so you have to pay a fee? So okay, we're going to reduplicate. I don't know how difficult it would be. The nuance of my speech, the way that I try to express myself, and maybe, I don't know if it's possible, the tones, the actual way that I use verbs and consonants and how I express myself. So, okay. So we're going to call somebody up. I want to use your model. How much are you going to charge me to do this?
Right. So there's free and paid models. And
Free. So we do it for free.
You can run them on your local computers. It's funny, I make YouTube videos about this. I recorded a video last night, so I'll send it to you after this, actually.
Okay, all right, okay.
But the short answer is there's free models that are open source, so that's a big thing in the software world. So, and there's a bunch of them that are coming out. Llama 3, Mixtral, there's a ton more. And then there's the more paid models. Think of your Googles, your Microsofts. Those are usually they usually are paid to use. So, and they're actually not super expensive.
Well, who would pay somebody if it's for free? It must be an advantage to paying somebody.
Yes, the advantage is it's running in the cloud. It's usually 10 times faster. And if you're going to run it locally on your own computer, you kind of have to have a beefy computer to run some of these AI models. So you need maybe a $1,000 to $2,000 really kind of beefy computer to take advantage of these, multiple gigabyte files, the large language models.
Now the big deal is training. So we're going to try and train the AI apparatus to imitate my speech and general way that my brain works, if I can say it that way. So they have to get some kind of thousands of conversations I've had, or how long does it? How hard is it to reduplicate my speech and
So
context?
I think there's three major steps that we would have to do. So step one, we would take one of those existing large language models that are just good at talking. We just need to have a base foundation. The next thing what we would do is I have cloned myself. I've literally done exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
I made a Brandon ghostwriter.
Oh, really?
So what I have done is you will take in, I think I have about like 50 emails, 10 YouTube scripts, and basically just a good chunk of how I normally conversate with others. And then you can basically there's a thing called RAG, but basically just think of it, it's just a database. It's just a database of how you and I talk.
Right.
And then outside of that, you basically can just analyze it and then just say, hey, going forward, I want you to speak like this. And the part that's actually really cool is because these large language models have a ton of other reference points, they'll go, well, Dr. Robinson actually talks like these 6 people together. So he's a combination of all these 6, because it does a lot of like by analogy. So
presumably they've got thousands of they've been trained on speech from all sources, and they would try and relate my nuance of the way I speak to the models they already have. They would search their to use it's not the best word,
database.
computer base, whatever database. They say, let's see, this is the way he conducts his vowels. So this is his A sound, and they'd run the A's through, and then find something that came close to it.
So there's multiple parts to it. So this is strictly text. This is all text-based right now.
Right.
They are working on text-to-speech, and that's a whole nother.
Okay, so this is not so much right now imitating my speech. It's imitating the way that I use words.
Yeah. So like if you were to articulate something to me of just like, hey, here's how I would go mow the lawn.
Right.
You have a certain way of talking and describing things, and it would. And you could do it in literally 10 minutes. It's crazy how fast this has come along. You could set something like that up.
And so they would compare whatever they've got from me, and they need a certain amount to be good at it. So how much would they require to be trained? As I understand it, they're trained on some bit of real JSR speech, and they compare it to speech from many sources. And so if just a neophyte AI apparatus did this, it would not be as good. You want the pro from Dover with the experience. Is that right?
So actually, there's the poor man solution, and then
Yes.
there's the expert solution.
Yes.
The poor man solution is to do kind of what I've just described, where like analyze these 20 emails, documents, everything.
Right.
Tell me who I sound like, and it will generate. Basically, everything comes down to prompt engineering, and I can dive into that too. But basically, you have let's just say 8,000 words that you could put into a prompt. Well, 3,000 to 4,000 of those words are going to be describing, oh, this is how Dr. Robinson talks, and here's how he would answer these kind of questions. So that's the poor man solution. And we can talk about it. And the like very advanced solution is, yes, you are generating thousands upon thousands of like phrases and questions,
Yes.
and you're answering it. That costs a lot of money. Not a ton, but it costs money, and it requires a ton of trading data. But it is definitely possible, and it's getting cheaper by the day. It's actually crazy how much.
So there's the poor man's. Presumably, it wouldn't quite if you were. I don't know. You were pretending you were sending an essay in that I'd written somewhere. That would not really. People could understand that it wasn't that great. But if you really went into it, you could really pretty much use the same kind of words I would use. Now, let me ask this question: would they say this is the order of prepositions he uses, or these are his favorite active verbs, or passive verbs, or inflected verbs, or whatever? They would just be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one of his inflected verbs he likes to use.
Yeah.
And
like the part that's very interesting about it is like you don't old programming, you would have to be very specific, like if talking and using verbs,
right.
Here's his 10 favorite. That was the old way of like
right.
how coding works. But starting with these more natural language models, they just kind of detect natural language patterns that you would use. And you don't have to programmatically say all that. It's just, here's some examples. You now know his writing style, and underneath the hood, thousands of basically, well, I'll stop there.
Well, okay, so presumably it's possible to just use the same way that I would express myself. AI could do that. Now, what about if the way that I have political opinions or solve problems, or could you say, well, we're going to try this out. This is the JSR solution to, I don't know, economic dislocations in Uganda, something like that.
Yeah.
How would he respond to that? Could they imitate whatever my response would be?
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be more complicated? Speech is one thing, but just to probing what I know about Uganda, what my predispositions have been,
Yeah.
I mean, does that require a lot of training?
So you got all the great questions tonight. So what you're describing is it's basically there's something called a vector database. So think of just like a normal matrix, like X,
Yes.
Y, Z.
Yes.
Well, technically, like you just mentioned, like your political thoughts on Uganda.
Right.
Let's just say what's happening is like, oh, all your thoughts are over in here in the 3D world. So
Right.
anytime someone was to ask a question about Uganda and
Right.
your political thoughts, it would just go, oh, here's just all the information he has on this particular subject. Now I'm just going to grab that, give it to the normal large language model, and go, here's everything he thinks about this subject. Now go answer the question. And it's crazy how easy to use some of this newer technology is. But that's 100% doable.
Now, has that been checked? In other words, okay, this is AI says this is what you would say about Uganda when this question came up. Would you? In other words, is there a feedback to say how good the AI was on this?
Yeah, so AI does, there's a thing called hallucinate, which is a very...
Well, that's bad, isn't it, if it does that?
which is a funny way to say, oh, it got it wrong.
Yes, yes.
So it's the PC way to say, yeah, it got it wrong.
Yes.
But I mean, that's where a lot more, you could get into like some more complex structures of how feedback loops, like nail on the head. There are ways to start to basically say, no, that was incorrect. Here's what you should have done in this state. And you're basically just continually updating the memory, which would be these things called RAG or vector databases.
And so, all right, let's suppose we're going to keep working on me, one of my favorite subjects. So, okay, well, that's not exactly what I would say to this is no. I have a different opinion, and so would the AI then try and correct and understand the mistakes they made by not reduplicating my Ugandan opinion?
Going forward, yes, you could update false. This is our updated.
Right now, what about just the channel? How long is it going to take AI? I mean, presumably, its merit is that it can do thousands and millions of computations,
Yeah.
millions and trillions of them, and then thus come to something. But if the limiting factor is just my opinion about it, then I'm not going to be able to have millions of opinions. It'll only be, I would say 5. Is that enough okay, we've had 5 interchanges. Now the 6th time this is tried, are they really getting pretty close to what I would think or say?
So it's not as much like, at least with the like, we'll call cloning you.
Yes.
It's not really like a feedback loop right now. It's more, at least in its current state. AI it's getting smarter.
Right.
It's mostly like, here's how he talks. Here are all of his thoughts that he's ever had. And I'm just going to grab all the thoughts that he has had, present it back to the large language model, and then it will kind of just guess to make an articulate response. The one thing I do think you would find interesting, just because like this would be super applicable to you, one of my favorite YouTubers, I cloned him.
Oh, really?
So I downloaded all of his podcast, all of his YouTube channels.
Right.
That took probably about 2 hours, 3 hours.
Right.
Transcribed them all. Took another 2 hours, and I put all of his thoughts on everything into one of these databases. And it was cool because then I could start chatting with him, saying, "Hey, I'm planning on doing this. What would you recommend I do?" "Oh, I'd recommend you do this," and then it would provide links. "Oh, this was in YouTube video number 3. This was in YouTube video number 4 or 5." So with all of your thoughts that you're putting out to the world right now, we could pull those down and people could chat with you virtually.
Yeah, I understand. Now let's just really, really push this. So we're going to try and really. Now I understand there are different expenses involved in training, and but we really want to pierce the boundary between my biological self and I guess the AI self. Yeah. So we're really going to put huge amounts of effort. We're going to put $100 million into it, and we're going to just go there for 6 months or whatever. How close, with unlimited amount of funds, the only thing that would be missing would be my going forward participation, since and you'd have to have access to all the data. So you'd have to mine the data that's out there. So if a person did not have much of a record of, let's say, commenting on Uganda, it would be difficult. But so is that a limiting factor in tremendous resources, probe everything, but you maybe have to base my Ugandan opinion on other things that I've said that are similar, not necessarily that. There might not be enough data. So you'd have to say, well, these are what he's said or whatever, and would there be a time limitation on it? In other words, okay, we're going to get everything I've said, but I'm an elderly guy, and my viewpoints have changed with age. If we look back, I don't know, 30 years ago, we plug stuff in, it might not work. So in trying to have an unlimited amount of money, let's say whatever, and time and computer power to try to get there, would you then say we're going to, would the apparatus say opinions seen 10 years ago will only count 2 points and last year 5 points? Does it do that? So, and who decides how much value to give to it?
So I'll go through a few different points. So the actual, in this example, to where we're literally cloning you, the bottleneck is you actually at this point. Well, it's not the technology. And what I mean by that is basically articulating all your opinions, what's happened to you. That's actually would be the hardest part right now. But going on to your next question of like, hey, I've talked about subject A, subject B, but not subject C in the middle.
Right.
Inference is basically what would be happening at that point. And yes, it would go, oh, both of those topics were about politics. Well, here are, politics is all in this area of his brain.
Right.
Well, here's his general thoughts. So this might be his take on this subject. And, it could infer.
Right, it could. Now, I understand all of this is possible, but to be persuasive for me would be, okay, this is here's $100 million, the 6 months, this is what you've come up with, and here's the deal, and how correct is the technology to recreate my opinions, which also have a lot of variability depending on the time of day. So what I'm saying, no, I'm not kidding. So because of the subtlety of causality, what I'm pushing here is I'm getting into the limitations of AI, and that would and if there's a marker, the score is 99, or somebody giving scores. Is there? It's certainly possible. So they're going to do this. They're going to run the stuff through, and this is what we've come up with, and we send it to someone and say, well, okay, that's only 65% correct, and that feedback loop would be a marker as to how successful the apparatus would be, and indeed, if it were possible to really anticipate everything that I would say in any particular opinion, that seems to be really a daunting challenge to do that. it's interesting. The attempt is out there, but
Yeah.
comments. How successful has it been just on that particular issue?
So I haven't. Most of the examples that I have seen or run into have just been the 95% solutions, because pushing it to that like 100% is where it blows up in cost and complexity. So it's definitely not where you're describing yet. But I'm very excited because the current bottlenecks that are preventing that from happening. Just to give you some context, at this point, I mean, it's doubling every 3 to 6 months. All the limiting factors are doubling in capability. So like, man, what used to be hard, literally a few months ago, I can do now. So the answer is it won't do it today, but I'm very excited to see it like probably by the end.
Now this is really, it's just pushing the subject a little bit.
Yeah.
So to me, it would be presumably easy for something like AI to win in chess or what's Go. What is that?
Yeah.
So they certainly can do that. But if you're going to really probe human opinions and all the vagaries that go into human opinions, that's really tough. But if you could do it, you could certainly shortstop many things. So you're a commercial guy and we want to see who's going to like ketchup on their hamburger, and I'm a ketchup manufacturer or whatever. So presumably you could just say, let's pick 50 Americans that are out there, or whatever. We'll pick them, and then we'll get the way their opinions work, and then we'll just start pushing buttons here. Well, they're going to like this kind of hamburger or this kind of ketchup. There would be a tremendous commercial advantage. And just to continue on the subject, if you could do this, you could also, let's say, look into political leaders and opposing political leaders. So the Chinese guys, maybe you could say, this is the way the Chinese guy is going to respond with increased tariffs. Or this is the Politburo will do this or that. And indeed, is that underway now?
So what you're describing, there is this concept called agents. And what agents are, they are pre-trained actors that have knowledge bases. It's like you, like we just discussed about cloning you. Well, what happens if we cloned you and I, and then we presented a theoretical problem in front of us? What's cool is you can actually have AI to start talking to AI to actually start working on solving a problem together. So all those ideas that you were discussing about like seeing how people would respond in different scenarios, that already does exist, which is a lot of people haven't got to play with this technology yet because it's still like low level and you have to basically be a software developer, but like it's coming.
Yes.
And I think people are going to be blown away once they see like what happens when you throw 100 different AIs to solve one single problem, and they're actually working together to achieve the goal, or simulate more confrontational things. Like that does exist, and it's actually very powerful. Some of the examples that I've already seen.
And you would presumably, the 100 AI people that did this, you would have them specialize. Well, you have the master AI, whoever or whatever that is, would say, well, we need people that live in Macon, Georgia, or have a Macon, Georgia input into this, and we also have we need some other kind of AI trained, especially trained AI that looks into one particular thing. This AI is interested in poetic speech. I'm thinking that, or whatever. And so you the 100 AI people. Someone picks out a particular AI apparatus to cover a particular part of the playing field.
Exactly.
Is that right? And yes.
Well, I'll say like just to give you some like concrete examples, because I think it's pretty cool when you just hear what it can do. So right now, AI is taking most of the like white collar jobs first. So software developer, marketing, like copywriting, like all of the things that are just mostly text and graphic based. Those are the jobs that are
they're taking away from humans.
Not taking away. You can work with them to as a software developer. I literally 10 times faster using some of these technologies. But just to give you some examples of like what these agent to agents could do, you can have a marketing expert, a copywriting expert, a brand strategist agent, and to literally could make you a own marketing strategy for Instagram. It would come up with all the posts you need to make over the next 6 weeks. and it's amazing some of the
And
results
then
you can get.
it would respond to the audience. So you'd say, well, this is if you're going to market a particular kind of ketchup in Wilcox County in South Georgia, this would be the best strategy. We'd like, I don't know, Herschel Walker to support it. So I mean, something like that. So they'd suggest to be successful here, have Herschel Walker, be on television touting this ketchup, or they'd come up with a plan along those lines. And then how successful would it be, and is it underway now? And then just to ask the question, which is a big one with our complicated social political arrangement, is it being used now to increase productivity and making appropriate economic decisions and presumably doing things more efficiently? So making manufacturing ketchup, there'd be no ketchup mistakes made, or relatively few. Is a comment on that, and how effective are commercial activities now with this AI possibility?
Right. So basically, I'll kind of go question by question. One of the first ones was like, how is it being used now to increase efficiency? So most of the gains that you're seeing right now are more towards output, not minimizing mistakes. I think that's like a good way to phrase it. And what I mean by that is a marketer, a software engineer, anyone who needs to produce an output can 10x their work. And as a result of that, you no longer need large, complex teams to accomplish goals. For example, you're going to, in my opinion, you're going to see a lot more rise in one-person companies, just because I no longer need to hire 6 people. I just will work with 6 different AI agents that I've trained.
Now, we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm quite interested in healthcare and AI. And so the thing that would be difficult, I mean, I could see, well, AI, we're going to look into gallbladder problems or something like that and come up with the best treatment for gallbladder issues, or how we could improve gallbladder treatment in Georgia. But the coding would be the problem. So AI can only go with the data that it's obtained, and so much data is obscure. It's hard to, it's subjective. Well, this person had complaints, I don't know, 3 days before, but actually it's 4 days before, if the truth be known. So is there a problem with coding? Once the data is there, so that's the reason I'm saying it's going to do great in chess or playing Go. The data it's secure, it's definitely 100%, but so much data is subjective. And the story we mentioned earlier about subjectivity of ketchup, who's going to like ketchup and who's not going to like ketchup, it may well be that the ketchup lovers are, the data is blurred by confusion over what is ketchup as opposed to, I don't know, cocktail sauce or something. They're blurred. And with gallbladder problems, I know a huge amount of stuff is subjective. And your comments about that. Subjectivity and the coding that happens. So is that the barrier for really superior AI stuff? The coding, getting the correct number or binary code, or whatever, the 1 or 0, getting that code in there, and how hard is that? And is just, I would say that question.
So I think the best way to answer this is to actually look at what Tesla is doing to solve full self-driving. And the 2 biggest things that they are working on achieving is just generally more data. So if you look, their stocks earnings came out yesterday. In my opinion, one of the biggest things that was exciting is their amount of data that they just captured doubled, basically, for just people driving on the road, which means more training data, which means more ability to accomplish full self-driving. Same thing if we're going to go back to the gallbladder side of things. It would be our ability to capture the data and actually just look through a ton of data to figure out it depends what you're trying to solve for, actually. Do they have it? Yes or no? Or are they about
but right now that's the problem. Yeah. So the subjectivity of saying is there a gallbladder problem or not, and that's a very difficult question. And indeed, I'll now
Yeah.
ask this question. I get the way that the AI can solve problems and do this and all the possibilities, but is the limiting factor the coding that goes into the process? When a person says, it hurts here, but it doesn't really hurt there, or I'm pretending that I have the problem to get sympathy, or I guess is this what happens? So there are 25 nuances to a person having gallbladder problems, and we're going to discover what those 25 nuances are in order to code this in a more correct fashion. I mean, is that what happens, or comments?
Yeah, I mean, so
Yes, go ahead.
yeah, I'll say. I mean, the main thing that you'll always hear, like going into like more machine learning field, is garbage in, garbage out. So
Right.
if you are feeding, if your training set is people, if they're unsure, if you get unsure data, you're going to get unsure answers. So that's literally the hardest part of working with basically training one of these models is getting actual proper data. So how do you get data is actually the coding, easy at this point. We know what to do.
Right.
The capturing the data and labeling it, that is the harder part right now.
All right, well, I'll say labeling the data, if you want to say the way that the input goes, but that's the art form that's outside the purview, or is it, of AI?
So there's labeled data and unlabeled data. I know a lot of places can, basically working with unlabeled data, you can extract meaningful data, but I've never seen it work as well. And after this, I'll have a few Tesla videos I'd love to share with you of how they're training their cars. And
Right.
Some of it is unlabeled data, and the way they work around that is just giving it a ton more unlabeled data. So if you don't have good labeled data, you just have to have an absolute ton of unlabeled data, just so it could detect some underlying patterns.
This has been a really interesting conversation with me personally, Brandon, and we'll have to talk some more. I'm particularly interested in healthcare. I mean, I see that as the technology, AI, riding to the rescue because of the extraordinary inefficiencies, expenses, whatever else. What can we do to make the situation work better?
Right.
And I'd really like to pursue what could be done. And from my point of view, this subjectivity is there. And in reviewing papers of one sort or another, particularly meta-analysis, which is a linchpin of, I guess you'd say, scientific data, medical data, we depend on meta-analysis. And yet, the meta-analysis, it makes so many mistakes and so many errors, and they retrospectively review data. So if you're trying to get retrospective data review, there's so many mistakes are made presently. Maybe AI could do better, but I'll say it's very difficult on that point.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, this is great. Now, finally, do you have any message for our large audience out there? Do you want them to get interested in AI, or is it going to save the world? Or last comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you haven't already started using, it's called ChatGPT-4. I would definitely recommend using that. I think as people start to experiment with it and start using it to solve their own problems, once you try it, you're hooked. So
Okay.
That would be my main recommendation.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Brandon.
It's
Thank
been
you.
awesome.
We'll have you back. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.